The Murphy brood are known for being unbelievably cruel and territorial and can perhaps best be described as horribly inbred yokels who murder, loot and pillage all over, owing to their physical deformities and brutal acts of violence. They rarely wear shirts and are considered by some to be more akin to a horde of animals or savages rather than an actual criminal gang. The gang does not appear to have a coherent ideology like the Lemoyne Raiders or the Del Lobo gang, but rather seem intent on controlling the local area and keeping the populace in terror. The Murphy brood have a number of similarities to Boone Helm, infamously known as the Kentucky Cannibal. Helm was known to be a troublesome individual, who briefly ran a six-man gang. Helm was notorious for robbing people and consuming their flesh, and showing little to no remorse for his actions. Murphys are unusually durable compared to other human NPCs, being observed surviving point-blank shotgun blasts, and in some cases even headshots with lesser firearms. The Murphy brood do appear to have a particular dislike of city folk, as they are often seen robbing people who come from the larger cities in the east. In addition, the brood appear to be opposed to the ever-growing industrialization of the local area. Unlike other outlaw gangs like the O'Driscoll Boys, the Murphys don't carry any valuables and players mostly receive cigarettes, tonics, and herbs from looting them. Another difference is that the Murphys don't camp in the wilderness. Instead, players usually encounter the Murphys while they are looting at travelers' camp. Murphys participating in scripted ambushes against the player will always carry money. The Murphy brood frequently use volcanic pistols and double-barreled shotguns, making close-quarters combat with them a very deadly prospect due to the damage they deal. The Murphy family first immigrated to the United States in the 1700s, moved to Roanoke Ridge sometime after, and lived a comfortable life. After the industrialization of the area, they were forced to seek seclusion in Beaver Hollow. It was here that they began their gradual descent into savagery, and by the year 1899 were known for brutally torturing, murdering, and dismembering their victims as well as imprisoning women they captured before raping and torturing them, often for days on end before killing them. These horrible deeds made them feared all over the Roanoke Ridge area. Some groups of Murphys have custom cattleman revolvers and double-barreled shotguns in blued steel with iron sights or trigger guards. They use a method called bluing, a passivation process in which steel is partially protected against rust using a black oxide coating. The Murphys live in secluded areas and don't have money to buy gun oil to keep their weapons in good conditions. The Murphy brood are quite similar to the Skinner brothers found in Tall Trees, West Elizabeth, owing to all three gangs' extreme brutality, savagery, and them being more like a band of crazed serial killers than a gang of outlaws. The first few times the player camps in Roanoke Ridge, they will be approached by Murphys at their campsite, who will then attempt to intimidate them into staying away from the area. Any horses originally in the possession of the Murphys will be covered in various wounds and other signs of mistreatment, suggesting they either do not care for their animals or that their cruel actions extend to more than just people. The Murphy brood still survive after the fall of Beaver Hollow and often launch attacks against Arthur thereafter. This includes sending a flaming cart down upon him, before attacking him en masse, attempting to bring him down with sheer numbers. However, it never fully regains the strength it once had. A large portion of the Murphy brood still exist by 1907, with seemingly little action made by the local law enforcement against them over the years. Their largest presence is seen at Beaver Hollow, which they have since retaken after the Van der Linde gang were forced to flee. They may attack John if he camps in the area, or appear elsewhere, but these encounters seem to occur slightly less frequently. The Laramie gang are paid thugs used by rich families looking to buy more land. If the current landowner doesn't sell, then the Laramie gang will find a solution. They start with intimidation, but will happily do anything to make sure they receive their payment. No one is safe when they have a contract, and they take pleasure in killing anyone or anything that gets in their way. The name of the gang, derived from the French surname La Ramie, often refers to various locations in Wyoming, including a city, county, river, and mountain range. The gang's characteristics and actions in the game, including intimidation, assassination, etc., reflect those of gunmen hired typically by large ranches during the early 1890s in Wyoming's infamous Johnson County War, which has been a popular basis for countless Western novels, films, and television shows. The Laramie gang cannot be encountered before the epilogue. Unlike any other gang in the game, the Laramie gang is the only one whose members are identified as stranger instead of their own gang name when the player interacts with them. John Marston first encounters the Laramie gang in 1907, when he arrives at Pronghorn Ranch with a supply wagon. Two members commandeer his wagon, but John chases after them and retrieves the wagon. After this incident, John becomes a ranch hand on the ranch. Several Laramie gang members later arrive at the ranch and threaten Abe, but John intervenes and beats up their leader in a fistfight, causing him and the others to flee. In retaliation, the Laramie gang attacks the Pronghorn Ranch a few days later, killing 2 workers, stealing the cattle, and setting several buildings on fire. This results in John, Tom Dickens, and Abe assaulting Hanging Dog Ranch, where the gang is hiding. After all the gang members at the ranch are killed, John confronts and executes their leader. Despite the elimination of most of its members, the Laramie gang continues to be active in certain parts of the map. They occupy Hanging Dog Ranch and will attack the player on sight if they approach them. They can occasionally be encountered around Big Valley as well, where they will also be hostile. Despite only being active in Big Valley, their gang photo depicts them in New Austin. This may be a developer oversight, or it could imply the gang was supposed to appear in New Austin as well. In newspapers, they are called the Laramie Corporation. The name is a reference to the Wyoming Stock Growers Association, which became a powerful economic and political force with corporate-like interests by the 1890s. The association often hired groups of gunmen, ostensibly to eliminate cattle rustlers, but also more pointedly to attack small farms and independent ranches. The Lemoyne Raiders are made up of both Confederate veterans and recruited, disenfranchised young men with reactionary views. As a result, they are deeply racist, anti-government, and have a bitter desire for revenge against the North. Structured like a militia, the group initially formed up as a neo-Confederate organization that was appreciated by locals before they became nothing more than a nuisance, terrorizing the town of Rhodes and on a much smaller scale St. Denis being more feared than respected. They are involved in numerous rackets, from trading moonshine with the Braithwaite family, among various other illicit goods, to selling arms to buyers in South American countries. The Lemoyne Raiders share similarities with the real-life Quantrill's Raiders, a pro-Confederate militia active during the American Civil War of which Jesse James and his brother, Frank James, had served as members of. Additionally, a letter that can be looted from the corpse of a Lemoyne Raider in a random encounter alludes to the Lawrence Massacre, an infamous raid conducted by Quantrill's Raiders on August 21, 1863, in which the group attacked the town of Lawrence, Kansas, targeting Unionists, abolitionists, and freedmen. They also resemble the real-life white supremacist paramilitary groups, the White League and Red Shirts, in several respects. Both also had veteran soldiers of the Confederacy in its ranks and focused on attacking those who they perceived as against their cause, such as African Americans, whites who supported the Republican Party in the South, and Northerners. Just like the Lemoyne Raiders, their origins were initially well received. Outlaws by nature, the group is also violent, being known for murders and robberies of Northerners, government officials, and law-abiding citizens alike throughout Lemoyne. They are extremely territorial and vengeful, prone to launching retributions against those who antagonize them. Their superior arms and training make them more dangerous than most gangs, as they will organize effective ambushes against the player instead of chaotically attacking them on sight. The Lemoyne Raiders are first encountered when Sheriff Lee Gray sends Dutch, Arthur, and Bill to accompany Archibald McGregor in shutting down one of their moonshining operations. The assault is successful, and the Van der Linde gang take the moonshine for themselves. Around the same time, Arthur and Sadie have their wagon stopped by several Lemoyne Raiders who wish to rob them. Sadie shoots at one of them, initiating a battle in which the group of raiders are slain. The Lemoyne Raiders are encountered for the last time when Arthur and John are sent to Shady Belle to clear it out, in order to make it the gang's next camp location. When the duo arrive at Shady Belle, they are attacked by 2 Lemoyne Raiders. They are shot dead, and afterwards, Arthur ventures upstairs and kills 2 more raiders taking shelter in the upstairs rooms. He then finds an elderly Lemoyne Raider in the master bedroom. Unless the player kills him before, during, or immediately after the speech he gives, he then proceeds to shoot himself in the head with a revolver, ending his own life. Later in 1899, a newspaper article reports that most of the Lemoyne Raiders members have fled to areas in Texas after repeated clashes with the government and law enforcement. It is also stated that Lemoyne Raiders are well received in Texas, as the locals share their disdain for paying taxes and the U.S. government. By the time of the epilogue in 1907, the Lemoyne Raiders can still be found throughout Lemoyne, but to a lesser extent than they could 8 years prior. Compared to the guns dropped by other gangs, the guns the Lemoyne Raiders use, especially those belonging to older and possibly veteran members, are much less likely to be worn and may even be pristine. This is due to most of the veteran members' prior time in the Army, which was likely who taught them how to properly maintain their weapon. The Foreman brothers, also referred to as the Foreman Boys, are an African-American outlaw gang. The gang is led by Anthony Foreman. It is unknown when the gang was formed, but it is seen that the gang is predominantly or completely made up of African Americans. At some point a young woman called Tilly Jackson joined and ended up killing Malcolm Foreman, one of Anthony Foreman's cousins, before fleeing the gang after years of abuse. Tilly says it was for a justified reason and hints Malcolm tried to make advances on her. Despite her reasons, Anthony seeks revenge on Tilly, viewing her actions as betrayal. The Anderson boys were founded sometime before 1899 by Anders Anderson. According to the newspapers, they soon instigated a reign of terror in Scarlet Meadows. One of the more notorious crimes they committed was the kidnapping of 3 wealthy individuals, whom they ransomed back for a sum $2,000 each. 2 of those they ransomed back were horribly mutilated. Unfortunately for them, the sheriff of Rhodes as well as his deputy eventually tracked them down shortly after the Van der Linde gang arrived at Clemens Point. The Watson boys are a gang of outlaws that can be found at the Watsons' cabin in Big Valley, West Elizabeth. Led by Mama Watson, they consist entirely of her 4 sons. Arthur has the option of interacting with, robbing, or killing Mama Watson. If she was spared, the 4 Watson boys will later visit their mother to tell her about trying to use the money they get from their criminal exploits to move her out of the country. She will express disinterest in the plan. If Arthur attempts to enter the house, the brothers will attack him, and he has the option of killing them all, subduing them, or simply running away. If all of her sons are killed, Mama Watson will curse at Arthur. She can be killed as well. If Mama Watson is left alive, the player can later find her rotting corpse in her bed during the epilogue. They appear to be partially inspired by the Dalton gang from the French comedy western comic series, Lucky Luke, due to being a gang of 4 brothers with the mother as the leader. Similarly, they also live in a small cabin in the woods. Unlike most of the game's gangs, who spend a lot of their time robbing and killing for money, the Skinner brothers don't seem to care about that at all. Everything that the Skinners do seems to be focused on killing and torturing people in terrible ways. Although they don't show up until the John Marston-led epilogue, the sheer cruelty of their actions makes them arguably the most memorably horrific gang in the game, only rivaled by the Murphy Brood and Nightfolk. The Skinner brothers are a gang of ruthless killers and thieves who move from place to place to hunt and kill animals and people alike. The Skinners are notorious for their cruel and sadistic acts and horrific tortures. They're known to, among many things, scalp, dismember, disembowel, roast and flay people alive, being less like an outlaw gang and more like a cult of deranged serial killers. They seem to be nomadic, and completely cut off from civilization. As such, the gang has no formal dress code, though many of them do possess large, unkempt beards and scruffy clothing, as a result of their lifestyle. The Skinner brothers can sometimes be heard muttering some odd statements if the player gets close without being detected. In these lines of dialogue, the Skinners discuss hoping that their murders impress someone, with the implication being that they're speaking of some higher power. What the Skinner brothers believe they will receive from their higher power for their killings is not made clear in Red Dead Redemption 2. They seem concerned about displeasing it, but their plans never include anything but wanton slaughter, so they clearly believe that is what the being they worship wants. Also, unlike most gangs, they have no base of operations on account of their nomadic lifestyles, instead living in primitive camps, either their own or one seized from their victims. According to Charles Smith, the Skinner brothers arrived in the Tall Trees, West Elizabeth around 2 years before 1907 and have been terrorizing people in the area ever since. Members of the gang can be encountered as hostile enemies in several gang hideouts, and during stranger missions and random encounters. Known members are Otis Skinner and Elias Green. Both are wanted dead or alive and, as such, they can either be killed or captured by John Marston. If the latter option is chosen, they will be publicly hanged in Blackwater. The Skinner brothers perform sadistic acts on their victims similar to that of the Murphy Brood gang, which are located in Roanoke Ridge, as well as the Nightfolk. All 3 gangs horrifically mutilate, torture and murder their victims and often attack and kill people seemingly just for the enjoyment of it. Many members of the Skinner brothers wear similar clothing to Dutch's gang in Red Dead Redemption. Some are also of native origin, which further adds to the similarities. Additionally, the Skinners are endemic to Tall Trees, which is where Dutch is mentioned to have been sighted and later operates his gang in. Unlike other outlaw gangs, the Skinner brothers don't have a main hideout that players can attack. Despite Charles Smith stating that the gang arrived in Tall Trees 2 years prior to 1907, they can be encountered as enemies in the region as well as the Great Plains in Red Dead Online. The Nightfolk are a group of voodoo-esque killers who live in and around the swamps of Bayou Nua and Blue Water Marsh. They attack people by setting up traps at night and then rob, loot, and pillage everything of value before murdering their victims in extremely gruesome ways. They only use bows and melee weapons and wear tattered, torn, and heavily worn clothes, and at other times they can be found covered in dirt, for camouflage, or white paint and wearing primitive, handmade clothing. They do not speak but seem to communicate in a language of clicking and hissing. While the Nightfolk are known to stage attacks during the daytime, they have a much heavier presence during nighttime. Evidence of rituals performed by the Nightfolk can be found in various places of the map, such as Butcher Creek. A pentagram can be seen here at night, and in West Elizabeth, there is a ritual site which possesses the same sigils that can be seen around their other territories such as Lacaille. The Nightfolk are among the only 4 enemies in the game that can kill a player in a single hit, regardless of their statistics. The other 3 include the Vampire, the Hermit, and Sheriff Freeman. The Del Lobo Gang is an outlaw gang, appearing as minor antagonists in Red Dead Redemption 2, and as major antagonists in Red Dead Online. The Del Lobo Gang consists of mostly Mexican men who are outlaws, exiles, or opportunists. The dispute between Mexico and America has brought this gang to the town of Thieves Landing, which they use as their main base. Here, they steal, fight, and often kill people. Though the gang is mostly comprised of Mexicans, and seem to be in conflict with the US government over long-standing tensions after the Mexican-American War, somewhat parallel to the Lemoyne Raiders, who are similarly at odds with the government over the Civil War, they appear to allow Americans into their ranks. American members can sometimes be seen throughout New Austin, alongside their Mexican counterparts. While their main base is the notorious Thieves Landing, they also operate out of Fort Mercer, a long-abandoned American military base in Rio Bravo, the village of Twin Rocks, the old mining settlement known as Gaptooth Breach, and the abandoned farm of Solomon's Folly. The Del Lobo Gang in several respects resembles the real-life Five Joaquins gang. Similarly, it was perceived to have been led by predominantly Mexico-born men who were family members. Throughout 1899 and 1907, the Del Lobos can be seen terrorizing New Austin with robberies and town raids, while facing very little resistance due to the cholera outbreak and subsequently a lack of law enforcement in the region. A newspaper article mentions how Del Lobos terrorize Valentine and Strawberry. While they can be seen assaulting Valentine in Red Dead Online during the story mission Bring a Goddamn Posse, members of the gang cannot be encountered near Strawberry. The Del Lobos are the most widespread gang featured in Red Dead Redemption 2 and Online, as they appear to have a presence in all 5 states. They are most common in New Austin. A random conversation can be heard between Del Lobo members where some of them are thinking of heading back to Mexico and possibly working for the army, while some would opt to stay in the US. The group of Del Lobos that the player encounters east and south of Armadillo have custom handguns and rifles with gold-plated parts, ebony grips, and expensive varnishes. The Del Lobos are the only group of NPCs in Red Dead Redemption 2 known to throw dynamite and fire bottles at the player. These weapons can also be looted from their corpses. The Del Lobos' method of breaking their leader, Cortez, out of the Rhodes jail is identical to the one used by Dutch van der Linde to free Arthur Morgan, if he manages to get incarcerated there. The O'Driscolls have been around for about a decade as of 1899, having first emerged around the early days of the Van der Linde gang. After Dutch van der Linde killed Colm's brother, a long-standing rivalry arose between the two gangs. The O'Driscolls managed to attract many young men into their ranks, and thanks to their large quantity of members, covered a lot of territories. The O'Driscoll boys in several respects resemble the real-life Dalton gang, sometimes known as the Dalton Boys or Dalton Brothers, and its successor, the larger Doolin Dalton gang, regarded as the original Wild Bunch, which in turn was a separate entity entirely from Butch Cassidy's Wild Bunch. These 1890s-era gangs were recognized for the Irish heritage of many of their leaders and members, as well as for their violent exploits and deaths. Colm O'Driscoll is said to prefer quantity over quality when it comes to recruitment, so standards to join the gang are very low. All that is needed to qualify for membership is for one to be able to operate a gun, to ride a horse, and to plunder and pillage without thought. The leadership's loyalty to their men is no different. Every individual member is expendable, and Colm appears to have a knack for easily finding replacements for the men he has lost. This makes the O'Driscoll boys very much the polar opposite of the Van der Linde gang. While the latter is small, it is a tight-knit group filled with some of the most prolific criminals and gunslingers of the time. The former, meanwhile, is just a huge horde of poorly equipped and trained nobodies, who only really have their sheer numbers as an advantage. While most of the gang seems to be American, a significant portion of it is made up of Irish immigrants who have strong accents and common Irish names such as Patrick and Seamus. Indeed, Colm himself appears to be of Irish descent, and the gang's color seems to be green, which is often associated with Ireland. The gang is ruthless and has no qualms about murdering innocents, including women and children. The O'Driscoll boys is the only gang that simultaneously has camps and hideouts in more than one territory, West Elizabeth and New Hanover, which stands testament to the gang's large size. They are the only gang that will incur a wanted level if their bodies are seen. This is most likely a bug. The O'Driscolls are greatly weakened by their constant battles with the Van der Linde gang, the relentless hunts by law enforcement, and the death of Colm. The last of the O'Driscolls are eliminated by Sadie Adler and Arthur Morgan by request of the former. The last O'Driscoll left is Tom himself, who is stabbed viciously and killed by Sadie, as he was the one who murdered her husband. This skirmish spells the end for the O'Driscoll boys, with their remaining leader and members all eliminated, thus wiping them out for good.